Thank you for inviting me. I actually took a part in this group that actually designed these forms. I'm coming from the Faculty of Computer Information Science, and I'll try to present these forms and give you some instructions how to fill these forms that are supposed to take part of submissions of doctoral dissertation and also doctoral dissertation plans from this year onwards. So first, something about data. So I often say that now we live in a data-driven world, right? So we are all dealing with data in all areas, aspects of our lives, but especially there is almost no doctoral dissertation nowadays that really do not heavily rely on data, right? So it's really an important aspect of every dissertation, and it's fair that we treat this asset in the right manner, right? So, and maybe sometimes we do not treat it as we're supposed to, and then we have some problems, as we heard just in the presentation before mine. So that's why the data management plan was introduced as a requirement for the doctoral students, with the main purpose to consider how the data either collected or generated in the course of the doctoral dissertation research will be preserved and made accessible to others. So this was the main intention of introduction of this Article 50 in the rules and regulations of the doctoral studies at the University of Ljubljana, somehow enforcing consideration of FAIR principles and preparing this management plan in order to handle the data during the research and also after the PhD has been completed in a smooth and a public manner, I would say. So this article was introduced, Article 50, right? This provision that actually regulates the data management plan and all the related aspects of it into the rules were introduced a couple of years ago, but actually it came into the force this year. So the students enrolled in the doctoral study at the University of Ljubljana in the year 2021-22 are the first one that actually have to provide these data management plans. Up to now, it was a kind of suggestion. The students could do that, but from now on, this is a requirement. That's why we prepared these guidelines for research data management planning and also the templates to help you with preparing this data. I'll go through these templates in a minute or so. So basically, it requires to answer 3 groups of questions about the data as such, and about the storage and protection during research, and also what will happen with the data in long term after the doctoral dissertation has been completed. So I have to say that we had 2 goals when preparing these templates. So the first one was really to make students to be aware of the importance of the appropriate handling of data during the research and also after the research, and to somehow force the students, right, to remind the students to plan this data management in advance. We heard very nicely in the previous presentation why this is important. And that was also the main reason that this requirement was included into the procedure of doctoral dissertation at our university. But we also have the second goal. We researchers, we usually really don't like paperwork. We don't like to do some additional administrative work that we seem to be administrative, right, as such. So we wanted really to strip those documents to the really essential information that should be provided. So I think that with the forms that I'll present, we somehow fulfilled both goals, like to put information that is needed, but really not more than that, right? So it's I hope that this will work fine from this year on when the students will start using it. Okay, so I'll present these slides, but before I do that, I just mentioned this FAIR again. So I really don't. I would really like that these documents are not generated just because they have to be generated, right? So I really want that all the students, after the documents are submitted, really follow what is written in their documents. We all encourage this FAIR principle, like findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, as we heard before. And this is a very, very good practice of open science, and it contributes to the to science even more than if you are somehow closed in your your world, in your data. We should somehow disseminate our work as well as data, and allow our data to be used also from the others to, I don't know, replicate our results or build on top of them. So, of course, also for this accessibility, reusability, and so on, there can be some limitations. We'll be talking about that later on. But let's first show me like this tools, these templates, and also what this famous Article 50 is actually saying about that. So it was introduced a couple of years ago with the purpose that I just mentioned, so to somehow handle the data that has been created and used during the doctoral dissertation in some responsible way. And actually 3 articles refer to this article and actually regulate when this data management plan should be submitted. So first, there are 3 points in the life cycle of a doctoral dissertation development that are considered here. So first, when the student submits the application for approval of the doctoral dissertation proposal, which happens in the middle of the 2nd year typically, the DMP draft should be submitted. So at that point, the student already knows, because he writes the dissertation proposal, so it is already known what the topic of a dissertation will be. So it should be aware of what kind of data will be used, how the data will be collected, how it will be stored, how it will be managed. So the draft of this DMP plan should be submitted already at this point, right? And then this is a living document, right? So the student can update this document with some new stuff that comes up during the research, even later on, and then the final or almost the final updated data management plan is supposed to be submitted at the end, almost at the end of the doctoral study. So a couple of months before the final submission of the doctoral dissertation, the student presents the research work to the doctoral committee, and at that point it submits also the updated DMP, and then together with the final version of the doctoral dissertation, it submits the final data management plan that stays also after dissertation is finished. So it can update the previous one if needed, or if everything was considered correctly, if nothing new has to be added here, also like this pre-final version can be considered as the final data management plan. So this is from the procedural point of view when the doctoral student should submit something. Now I will also present the templates that we prepared to do that. So basically these templates were prepared with the aim to help students to put all relevant information together that is supposed to be contained in the data management plan. So 2 documents were prepared. The first one we called like data management draft, which is to be submitted by the students when submitting a doctoral dissertation proposal. And since this is at the beginning of the study, it could also be shorter, right? But still, it should contain all the relevant information, and also the students should be aware of all the information that is supposed to be available, all the data that is supposed to be collected. The students should really think already at that stage how we'll manage the data. So this document should somehow just put in words what the student should know anyhow, right? And then at the end, very similar questions, basically the same questions should be answered into the final data management plan. But at this point, it could be a little bit more elaborated because the students has already finished the dissertation and knows everything basically about the data that was collected, how it was treated during the research, and it should know how this data will be treated in long term with respect to availability and storage. So these two documents, templates, together with some additional instructions, are published on these links that are written here. And I really suggest you to use them, or at least to look at them, and then maybe you can write these data management plans differently. But these are the most critical questions that should be addressed in one way or another. So let me go briefly through these two documents. Basically, I will spend more time on the first one because the second one is very similar. So first group of questions that should be answered is related to the type of data and methods used for data collection and production. So you could give some insights about what kind of data do you need, do you plan to use, will you just collect this data, use the data from some other repositories, or you produce the data, you will create the data? What kind of data will that be? You can give some details about for example, whether the data is numeric, textual, images, or is audio, video. Maybe even give some details about the data format you will be using for this data, storing data, handling data. You can explain also the methodologies or software that will be used to collect this data or to produce the data. You can state any constraints on reuse of existing data if there are any. So maybe you can try to give details about the volumes, how much data do you need. So it's, I would say, you put those information in that you consider important for your particular type of dissertation. So it's very difficult to come up with the uniform template for all different type of sciences we have at our university. So you probably will try to adapt and to focus on those aspects that are more important for your type of research. So one important issue is if you'll be dealing with some sensitive data, that you mentioned that, right? So that if the personal data, for instance, are processed, how will you comply with legislation or security? How will security be ensured? How will you comply with GDPR and so on? So if you're working with some ethical issues, you also need to enclose to this data proposal, dissertation proposal, the approval from the ethical committee. So in that sense, you have to write something about that also here. If you don't have issues with respect to that, of course, you just skip that. So try to consider as much as relevant information about data that you will be working with and put those information here. So the first group of questions is about the type of data and methods that will be used to collect the data. And then the second one is how the data will be stored and protected during research for a doctoral thesis. So now you have the data, you know how you have the data, what kind of data will you use, what issues arise from this data. Now you have to describe how will you store the data, how will you make the data secure, how will you access this data. I would suggest that give the preference to the use of more robust managed storage with, I don't know, maybe backup and so on. So this is make you think about how will you manage this data during the research. And again, this is even more important if you'll be dealing with sensitive data. This is even more important that this data will be safe and secure. How will you ensure that? So who will have access to this data, especially if you're working in some project with other partners? Will you share this data with them? So which kind of institutional data protection policies are in place and so on? So if there are any. So again, this can be very short, but if you have some issues that you would like to describe and you think they're important for management planning, please do include them here. And then the third group of questions you should answer is related to long-term data availability and storage. So after you finish your doctoral dissertation, you're not done yet, right? You're just done with that research, but this research data is very valuable. So you should publish it. You should make it publicly available if possible. If not, if you have some limitations with respect to that, I don't know, some intellectual property or patent protection or something like that. If you have some other reasons, you can restrict access to the data, at least for a certain period. But in general, you should publish the data in some repository where everybody will have access to it, and you must make sure that it complies with these FAIR principles I mentioned before, so that not that everybody can access it, but also can make use of it, and maybe replicate your results, build on top of your results, and so on. So like this third group of questions is therefore related to long-term usage of the data. So maybe this will not be so elaborated in the draft version, right? So because this is still a couple of years ahead from when you submit the proposal. Maybe for the draft version, the first group is more important, so that you think, and it forces you to think, what kind of data will you need? You need to plan that. So good data management is really crucial, and for making your research easier, and good data management planning somehow is a key to that. So I would say, do not take this DMP draft that you have submitted some additional work without any reason. It has a very deep reason, and it may help you to foster your research later on. And the same questions are to be answered also in the final version of data management plan. And as you can see here, the questions are written in the future tense, right? What data will be connected and produced? Here you describe in the past tense, right? What data have you collected and already produced? How you handle the data during the research? So now this is over, because this is at the end of the doctoral dissertation work. You know how you did that, and you describe what you did in the past, and again you describe more into the details how will you handle the data in the future, how will you make data available for long-term accessibility and storage. So these are the main questions that we want you to think about, right, when preparing this data management plan. You can use these forms that we published, or you can invent some new form of conveying this information, but please try we somehow selected those questions that we thought are the most important ones to be addressed in data management plan. So try to take them into account. But of course, you can use some other templates. This one is a good one, but it's very elaborated. It has a lot of questions. So basically, we started from this guidance for data management plans published. This link here. We stripped this document, really kept only the questions that I think we thought they're the most important ones. But maybe you have also a look at this document, maybe to better understand what those questions mean. And if some other questions are heavily related to your research, of course, you can add some more information into this data management plan that you are supposed to submit. So as a final guidelines, I would really suggest you for all the students that are listening to me right now and are at the beginning of their research career, to start thinking about the data management at the beginning of the doctoral study already, right? So, and consult your mentor. He's supposed to be more knowledgeable about that. So he should somehow consult you what is important, how to plan the data acquisition, and so on. So in this way, you have to do that already in the second year, which is something that in long term, it will turn as beneficial. So you might use this template, or you can use some other template or some your form, but please do convey this information which is included there. And of course, we've been working in very different scientific disciplines with different emphases and different types of data we are working with. So adapt the document to the disciplines, the specifics of your research discipline. So do not take these questions in this form as carved in the stone. No, it's really, if you have better way of conveying this data, it's even better. And although there is a lot of questions that we put, some of them should not even be answered, because if they are not relevant for your research, and also the answers to the questions are accepted to be brief and concise. It's not required to write the novels, right? But just to write down what is really important for your research. And as a final thought, maybe do not only put those answers to those questions in the documents, but also manage the data during research and also after that, according to these FAIR principles. And because data is also a valuable contribution to science as well. So try to be as open as possible. Yeah, I will conclude with that. So data is important, and because the data is important, data management is important as well. So I hope that I helped you in understanding what is actually required, like formally required, but also one is formality, but the other part of this same story is really the benefits that you get out of this data management planning in order to make your research smoother.